Hello, everyone. My name is Pedi Obani. I'm the Africanus Parent Team Lead. Really excited to have with us today Helen Westwood to talk about some things parents need to know about supporting children with GCSE, especially with maths. Welcome, Helen. We're really delighted to have you here with us today. Could you tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for having me. So, my name's Helen. I'm from Helen Westwood Maths. So, I was a secondary school teacher for 20 years, and then I made the move to work for myself. I now work as an online maths tutor. I also do some teaching for a charity, but the bulk of my work is supporting both school based and home educated students who are working towards their maths learning and predominantly GCSE maths.
Excellent. I mean, maths is not one of the easiest subjects, some people would say. And it's one of the subjects that parents really struggle with sometimes, from the parents we've spoken to just encourage the children, get them to engage. So how do you think parents can, motivate children to get interested in GCSE maths? Have you got any tips to share?
Yes, of course. I think one of the things, particularly with older students, so when they're in key stage 4, so sort of year 10, year 11, it can be really good to encourage students to think about what might they want to achieve with their GCSE maths. So have they got a particular sort of grade or target in mind? Is it that they want to have greater understanding of certain topics? Is there something maybe they found difficult before that they'd really like to sort of get a greater understanding with? Some students like to have sort of an aim or a target for themselves in terms of what they achieve with assessments. So I've got one student who set themselves the target that they wanted to be achieving over 80% in tests and assessments that they were doing. It could be that they have a target grade for GCSE maths, particularly if that's maybe linked to their next step. So what they might like to do at school, sixth form, college, or apprenticeships they might be interested in applying for that might need a certain GCSE grade. It can also be good to encourage students, so encourage curiosity in terms of what do they know now, what are their strength areas with their maths, and which areas might there need some further study with. So doing a little bit of sort of self-reflection and self-evaluation. It can also to help encourage that interest in not just GCSE maths but maths generally, to also encourage them to look for applications of maths in real life. So where the maths is useful and being open to they might actually use it in things like around the home or with things like DIY projects. So it gives it that application, management of their money with their calculating percentages. But with some of the more sort of obscure areas of maths, whilst it might not be something that we use in real life, while we're studying and understanding some of these more abstract or obscure topics, some aspects of algebra, for example, the students are also developing things like their critical thinking skills, their attention to detail, their ability to learn a method that they're then applying and using accurately. So that could also be, something that another element of the sort of interest in the subject. Now, like you mentioned at the beginning, maths as a subject can represent a challenge. It's a subject that's not, easy and straightforward for lots of people. So it can also be, encouraging students to reflect on that sense of satisfaction they might feel when they can see progress that they've made, when they've maybe made improvements in their understanding of certain topics, or where they've overcome challenges such as difficult questions, things that maybe previously they've not been able to do, now that they feel they've mastered.
I mean, that's very enlightening, especially the bit where you talked about just relating to everyday experiences and trying to get children to really understand why are you doing the maths. So I think you started out with talking about students who are already motivated, and I was wondering, what about those who are not motivated at all? But I think towards the end, you sort of covered that in terms of making it relatable and then trying to see how to just encourage them to see the value in doing it. And maybe not just for maths for the sake of maths itself, but for anything else that might be relevant for their future careers and things like that. So thanks. Now, you've touched on the point of challenges. I'd like to pick up on that one. What are some of the, if I could say, common mistakes which children make while studying GCSE maths, and how can parents support them through that process to address those mistakes?
Yeah, of course. I mean, one of the challenges GCSE maths, when we look at the whole specification, whether you have a student who's sitting higher GCSE maths or foundation GCSE maths, there is a lot of content to revise. And one of the challenges is if the process is not started early enough and students feel they've only got a short amount of time for revision, we can be in a situation where they're trying to sort of cram, or they're feeling quite sort of panicked or worried about only having a short time period for that preparation. So, one of the ways we can avoid that situation situation is sort of planning, revision early. That can be helpful, and it avoids that stressful situation of trying to do a lot in a very short space of time. Also, ensuring that when students are putting their revision time in, it's that they're revising in ways that are effective. So not just things that's quite passive, such as reading or just highlighting passages, but actually something that's active in their learning is testing their mathematical knowledge and understanding. So answering questions, whether that's through some online resources such as things like My Maths or MathsWatch or Dr. Frost that students might have access to, testing their knowledge. So where you have that revision guide and you ask them questions to explain the rules of indices or how to work out a cumulative frequency or averages from a cumulative frequency graph, and providing resources in terms of revision guides, sort of facilitating their access to some of the online resources. There are other things that sort of parents can do to encourage students to have that sort of plan and that structure to their revision preparation. Also, another common mistake can be that lots of students use past papers to revise, which is fantastic, but we've got to make sure that we've built up that really good knowledge of the key methods and facts to be using when we're answering those past papers. So making sure that we've revised those sort of key areas before we start sort of practicing answering questions with things like past papers, or having that sort of going back to doing revision and looking up methods and things that we might need to refresh our knowledge of before we sort of carry on answering those, because that really underpins a student's ability to be able to answer questions. So often when students say to me, oh, I couldn't answer that exam question, and then when I say to them, well, what do you know about the rules of indices, or how do we multiply fractions, it might be that knowledge that's missing. So there's that sort of two aspects.
No, I mean, thank you very much. And I just want to pick up on something you mentioned, Helen. You talked about, I think you said advanced maths, and there was something else you mentioned. So it does sound like there are different GCSE maths parents need to be aware of.
So there's essentially two tiers of entry. So a student will either be sort of studying the pathway and then entered for either foundation GCSE maths or higher GCSE maths. And they will have a target grade, which is generated from prior assessments such as the Year 6 SATs that will give that target grade. It's not the only piece of information that's used towards sort of deciding which of the two tiers the student might work towards. With the foundation GCSE maths, so that covers from grades 1 up to 5. The highest grade you can achieve in foundation GCSE maths is a grade 5. And if it's helpful to have a context with the old letter grades, a grade 5 is like a C+. It's like a high pass. With higher GCSE maths, that covers from grades 4 up to grade 9. So in order for a student to achieve a grade 6 or higher, they would need to sit the higher GCSE maths. But again, you could check with your child's maths teacher or maths department if you were sort of interested in sort of the pathway that your individual student, based on their sort of prior achievement and performance in maths, might be looking at working towards.
No, that's very helpful, especially because some of the parents we have with Afrikaners are new to the UK educational system. So it does help to give this background information. So thanks for that. Now, you've touched on some important ways we could support children to avoid mistakes with GCSE maths. You've talked about revision. You've talked about ensuring that they not just go through past question papers, but actually understand the principles and the ways the theories work. And then with that understanding, they can better address questions. So I was just wondering, do you have any other strategies or tips or suggestions on what you would consider as some of the most important things parents should be aware of to support the children to achieve success in GCSE maths?
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that's really helpful to try and encourage students to, keep that openness towards working hard. Like we've talked about maths being quite a, challenging subject that doesn't come easy to lots of students. So maintaining their motivation, keeping that sort of openness to working hard, persevering maybe when things get difficult or they're working on topics or areas of their maths that's difficult. Maintaining, a curiosity for the subject and that desire and motivation to reach their potential in maths, whatever that might be, thinking about what is their overall goal or objective. I think another thing that's really important is for students to have that openness to learn from mistakes. They might have mock exams or assessments that maybe don't quite go to plan, but actually how can we learn from that? And I had a student several years ago who made a mistake on a particular type of question in a mock exam, and he never lost a mark ever again because he was so annoyed with how that one assessment went. He made sure that every histogram question was complete from then on. And also with, small errors, so things, picking up things with our exam technique, making sure that, workings are being shown correctly, that we're rounding answers to the level of accuracy that we're asked for. So just those sort of small points as well, that is one of the things that doing our sort of mock assessments can be really helpful. Another thing that's, really important for young people is having that self-discipline to study, because of course, with the technology and how busy our lives are now, there are lots of other distractions, there are lots of other pulls on students' time. And, sitting down with the maths book, with the maths exam papers to revise and study, it can be a challenge when there's lots of other things going on. But that is a really important, factor for GCSE maths success. And of course, one of the benefits of, working, whether it's working with someone like myself, like a tutor, or attending, additional revision sessions that might be putting on, by school, is you naturally have that sort of regular time when you're sitting down, you're doing that study. So looking at how that sort of regular study and practice can be built into, the student's sort of diary, if you like.
Oh, that's really helpful. And I think I can imagine how important it was for that student, the one you mentioned, who had made the mistake but learned from it. So this idea of learning from mistakes is really critical, and this would apply in very many aspects of our life, in all aspects of our life, just being able to self-reflect and learn from mistakes. And one of the things that brings to mind is also the role that parents play in that process. So if things don't go according to plan, if children don't do well in the mock or in the SATs or in the GCSEs, how would you advise parents to support the children through that process?
I think it's a keeping up with the encouragement and supporting them with their growth mindset. So sort of acknowledging that, there's a result there, or there's an exam or mock assessment that's not gone to plan. So we can maybe evaluate, why that might be. Has our sort of level of revision not got, as high as we might like it to be? Is there certain areas that we need to do a bit more work with? But rather than students sort of maybe starting to label that it's something about them and they can't do maths, keeping open to that sort of growth mindset, and that fact that they maybe need that little bit more extra support, or spending a little bit more time looking at those different areas, because it's important that students don't label themselves and their performance in a negative way towards their maths, and start to feel like, well, maths is a subject that I just can't do. It might be that some students, need more support and need to take more time at working to something, but it's not to be sort of have a closed mindset around it. So parents can, encourage students, like I've mentioned, to reflect upon, maybe what might some of the factors be that have contributed to exam performance. Has the revision maybe not been as effective? It could be maybe not much enough revision has been completed. Are there topics that just naturally are not a strength area for that student? Sometimes I work with young people and they do a test, and it's literally all of the topics they find the most challenging on one test. So, they're the students that if they have these targets of, I want to get 80%, I talk to them about maybe we need to just adjust that a little bit, because we know that these are the areas of maths that we find more challenging. And encourage students to think about, what could they have done differently next time? Is there a particular revision strategy that it's shown has not been effective for them? And is there additional support that they can seek that might be helpful? Parents can also help with, organisation. So, encouraging students to find the time, in their sort of busy lives to, for completing their studies and working out how they're going to allocate this. This becomes particularly important, as say, when we've got students in year 10 and year 11 that are approaching not just doing their maths GCSE, but of course all of their GCSE subjects. So how they can organise their time to make sure that they've got time for all the revision and preparation that they're looking at doing. But of course, motivation ultimately has to come from the student. And whilst, of course, it's understandable that parents, have sort of aspirations as well for their students' learning, of course, when it comes to sitting down, revising, preparing for an exam, it is something that it sort of needs to come from the students. But parents can be really important from the point of view of supporting and encouraging that.
Thank you so much, Helen. It's been really good listening to you. I've made some notes, which I will definitely be coming back to. And on Tuesday, we will have a session with other panelists as well, speaking about different GCSE subjects and experiences that they've had. But it's been really enlightening listening to you. And you've also kindly shared with us some resources
Mm-hmm.
we have put up on the parents resource page. Is there anything else you'd want to add before I let you go, Helen?
No, I don't think so. Just saying good luck to all the young people out there with their maths. And I hope what we've talked about today has been helpful.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you.